Welcome. Safety at work is an important topic for everyone. When at work, there are 4 key things to remember. No job is so important that it can't be done safely. There should be no hidden dangers in your workplace. You have the right to know exactly what you are working with. It's up to you to be a safe worker. This means always choosing the safe way to do the task at hand, because ultimately, safety is up to you. And if you don't know, ask. If you think a work situation is unsafe, or if you just have a question about it because you don't know, ask before you begin. Now, let's talk about the specifics. You should only perform tasks or operate equipment that you have been trained on. Never work with machinery that is not properly guarded, meaning you shouldn't be able to reach into areas of the machine that have moving parts that could hurt you. Also, never remove a lock or tag, since these are intended to prevent equipment from accidentally starting while someone is servicing or repairing the machine. Now let's talk about work clothes and personal protection. It is your responsibility to show up properly dressed for a job. At certain workplaces, steel-toe shoes and long pants are required for your protection. If you're working with machinery, don't wear jewelry or loose-fitting clothing, as these could get caught in a machine and cause serious injuries. Some tasks may require you to wear personal protective equipment, also known as PPE. For example, many workplaces require everyone to wear safety glasses to protect their eyes. Other types of common PPE include gloves, to protect your hands from the material or equipment you're working with, earplugs or earmuffs to protect your hearing, and safety headgear to protect your head. If PPE is required, be sure to know how to wear it properly. If you don't know, ask. Now let's talk about hazard communication. You have the right to know what you're working with, and if there are precautions you need to take to protect yourself. It's also important to know what to do if there's accidental exposure. All chemicals come in a container from a manufacturer with a label that contains important cautionary information. There's the product identifier, which includes the name of the product and the manufacturer or supplier. You will also find the shipping name, shipping numbers, part numbers, and an emergency phone number. The label also contains signal words and hazard statements. You might also see a pictogram, along with the precautionary statements. If something doesn't have a label, ask someone to supply one to you. Because the pictogram is important, let's take a closer look at it. A pictogram is a symbol that represents a word or an idea. You see them all the time. When you see a pictogram on a chemical label, it represents the hazard of the product. A chemical can have multiple hazards, so it often has more than one pictogram. Pictograms come from the Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, or the GHS. They are health hazard, flammability, oxidizer, irritant, gases under pressure, explosive, corrosive, environmental toxicity, and acute toxicity. Labels and pictograms are your first stop for information on chemical products, but there is more information on the product that won't fit on a label. That's why chemical materials also have safety data sheets, or SDS. The SDS gives you complete information about a product, including any safety precautions. It's broken down into 16 sections, with the most important information in the first 8 sections. The first 3 sections provide information on the identification and the hazards of the product, as well as the list of ingredients. Section 4 covers first aid measures, in case you get the chemical in your eyes. Inhale it, get it on your skin, or swallow it. Section 5, firefighting measures. Tell you if the product can burn, or if it's affected when it's exposed to fire. Section 6, accidental release measures. Identifies what to do if the chemical spills, leaks, or is released. It tells you how to contain and clean up the released chemical, and what emergency procedures to follow. Handling and storage information is found in Section 7. Following these protective handling measures minimizes the risk of chemical spilling or being released. You'll also find recommendations for safely storing the product. Section 8, exposure controls and personal protection, describes the permissible exposure limits for the product, what engineering controls need to be taken, and what personal protective equipment is required when using the product. If you have trouble reading or understanding a label or SDS, ask an on-the-job supervisor for an explanation. Many companies use forklifts or other powered industrial trucks. It's important to stay out of the way when they are operating. These vehicles have a backup alarm. If you hear it, look to see where it's coming from and move out of the way. Never stand underneath a load. Even if you think you know how to, never attempt to operate a forklift unless you've been authorized by your employer and trained and certified on the specific equipment they are asking you to use. Now let's talk about ergonomics. How hard your job is has a lot to do with the way you do a task, how you sit or stand, how much force you have to use, and how you deal with repetition. Can make the difference between feeling good and feeling tired and sore. Whether you're sitting or standing, try to position yourself so you're not bent over or putting a strain on your body. If your workstation has adjustments, use them. If you're in the same position for a long time, change your position or stretch in the opposite direction. If you seem to be using a lot of force, see if a different tool or technique will help. Or if you can, switch tasks for a while. Now, let's talk about safe lifting. Many jobs involve some sort of lifting. Whether lifting is your primary task or you just occasionally have to pick up something, knowing how to do it safely can prevent an injury. Begin by getting a good, wide stance. Keep your back straight and bend at the knees. Test the weight first. Don't overestimate your ability. If it feels like you can lift it, straighten your knees, keeping the object close to your body. Keep your head up, elbows in, and lift with your legs in a smooth motion. Don't lift with a jerk. Never twist and lift at the same time. Turn your whole body instead of using your feet. If the weight you're lifting is more than 50 pounds, either try to reduce it, get someone to help, or use a lifting tool such as a hand truck or pallet jack. The temperature of your work environment is another important consideration in staying safe. Working in hot environments may lead to heat stress, which occurs when the body is unable to maintain a healthy temperature. Heat stress can result in heat stroke, heat exhaustion, heat cramps, or heat rashes. Know the symptoms and warning signs of heat illness, such as headaches, dizziness, weakness, or fainting. Mood changes such as irritability, confusion, and heavy sweating, and an upset stomach or vomiting. If you feel any of these symptoms, tell your coworkers and supervisor immediately because you may need medical help. To prevent heat stress disorders, take frequent breaks in the shade or a cooler area. These breaks help reduce the heat load on your body. Know your limits and ability to work safely in the heat. Also, when it's hot, drink water steadily before and during work and avoid caffeine. Now let's talk about emergencies. Most companies have emergency plans involving trained people. If there's an incident like a fire at your workplace, what you need to do is very simple. Get out and follow the instructions of the responders. Don't reach for a fire extinguisher. Don't attempt to put the fire out yourself. Evacuate immediately, and when you're sure you're safe, notify a supervisor so they can call 911 for an emergency response. When someone gets injured at work, they need help from someone who is qualified. Unless you have received training in first aid and CPR, you could make their injury worse and put yourself at risk. This is especially true if there are bodily fluids present, like blood. Careless contact could transmit serious diseases like HIV and hepatitis. Don't touch someone who is injured and don't attempt to clean anything up. Report the accident immediately to a supervisor. One last thought to leave you with. Remember, do your part in preventing accidents by reporting anything that seems unsafe. This could be an obvious violation or just something that doesn't seem safe. If you do have an accident, injury, or illness in the workplace, report it to your supervisor immediately. Also, be sure to report any incidents of workplace violence, threats of workplace violence, or harassment. These can be reported confidentially and without fear of retaliation. The company will then provide immediate guidance on the next steps to ensure your safety. Finally, keep in mind that your safety should always be your top priority.